also bring in Silkie Carlo right now, who's director of Big Brother Watch. Silkie, good morning to you.
Good morning.
What's your initial reaction that every police force in the UK will be using body cams?
Well, there are two things that we would like to have seen before this move was made, and one would be for a proof of purpose. So we would like to see the evidence that suggests that this is necessary for all frontline police officers to be wearing video recording cameras. And secondly, we strongly believe that there should be consistent guidelines on how these cameras are used, which we haven't yet seen. So, police officers shouldn't be able to simply turn the cameras on and off when they wish. There should be clear guidelines around whether they can film, for example, inside people's homes. And unfortunately, we haven't seen that yet, despite around £25 million being spent on these cameras.
OK, well, there's 3 points here. I mean, certainly the evidence, Dan, is something that Silkie referred to. I mean, you were there from the beginning, you did an experiment, and you've seen the evidence of these actually working. Then there's the guidelines about whether police officers can film in people's homes, and then there's also the business of when police officers can turn them on and off. Silkie, sorry, just stay there. Can we just actually sort of get your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, I mean, the Home Office will be drafting up very strict guidelines about the use of them, and they will exist. It can come down to interpretation from an individual police officer at the time, because they can be turned on and off. They're not running all the time, full time, for obvious reasons, because the recording devices actually fill up. And also there are other times, Silkie quite rightly, the point that she makes is right, that there are times when privacy is a key issue. So if they're running all the time, they wouldn't be able to turn them off when they go into people's homes, as she quite rightly says. If somebody's invited you in as a witness and they want to relay something to you, you don't necessarily want all of that being recorded and put onto a camera. At the same time, if you're going to a domestic violence situation into somebody's home, you would almost certainly want that film to be running. So you have to have discretion. You can't have hard and fast rules about every single time, and you can't just leave these things running. There are times when discretion has to take place.
That's a fair point. Silkie, do you accept what Dan is saying?
Of course, that police need to use their discretion, but the worrying thing is, at the moment, despite a national rollout, there aren't national guidelines. And at Big Brother Watch, we've had people get in touch with us who are very distressed that body-worn video has been used inside their home. And I think that really speaks to the broader concern about what could happen with body-worn video if the right guidelines aren't in place. It could become an intelligence gathering tool rather than an evidence gathering tool. And I'm not suggesting that that's the intention. I really sincerely hope that it isn't. But unless we have clear guidelines in place, that certainly is a risk.
I get what you're saying, and you're never going to keep everybody happy, are you? But I mean, where do you draw the line between improving public safety and infringement then on civil liberties?
I think we need to see some evidence of how body-worn video is actually helping police and protecting the public. In the stats that have come out today, we're seeing that around 10% of recordings are being used as evidence. When we did our research in August last year, we could find no data relating to the use of body-worn video in criminal proceedings. So I think we should have an evidence-based approach to this kind of policy.
Well, that's interesting, because what you might find when you do your research is that the use of body-worn video as evidence is so low because it's not actually required by the courts, because people have pleaded guilty to the original offences, because once the defence have seen the body-worn video, it's just gone straight through without having to be used. It's an interesting point that you make, but I mean, if we look at the numbers of assaults on police officers in particular, and the numbers dropping by those that are actually wearing body-worn video, I think that in itself speaks volumes.
I mean, what about cameras everywhere? I mean, that's the question that I'd like to hear from everybody this morning. 0808 100 9100. A couple of texts actually this morning, and Mike from Culham, thank you very much, Mike, who says, I have a camera on my motorcycle crash helmet. It's made such a difference for me. Used to get the odd car driver or van swerving or just being difficult. Now this is all stopped. Only have to point at the camera is enough. So if it makes, and actually the evidence seen by the BBC the evidence suggests that actually it makes people more considerate. It makes people, in whatever situation, whether it is on the road or whether it is, whether they're faced with a police officer or in any situation, if they consider their actions, they are much more measured about their actions. If it improves society, then surely not a bad thing. Claire?
It sounds like it's that deterrent effect again. The point you made about actually maybe it's not used in court because it's overwhelming evidence and they plead guilty, which is great. You see those videos of the nanny cams that are used in care homes, which have helped identify.
Incredibly disturbing, but
very disturbing. But again, those are done without their knowledge. But if they were used more widespread, more openly, would that help protect people in care homes? Ultimately, it's like a lot of things. It acts as a deterrent. My husband and I, we have, ironically, we're in Banbury, and you say about the number of surveillance cameras there. We live near People's Park. We know there's cameras there, but we still wouldn't walk through People's Park in the dark because it's not safe. But and things do happen during the daytime. There have been attacks there in the daytime. But if it's a deterrent, then it's working. There may not be any statistics about how many people have actually been prosecuted with that video evidence, because it is working as a deterrent. And you can't almost put a price on that because it's working. It's just not a tangible, evidence-based tool.
Richard in East Hendred, thank you for your text. And Richard says having cameras everywhere is just one step short of having the thought police, as in 1984. I agree cameras are needed in public places, but not private like people's homes. OK, what about the classroom then?
I think that's taking it a step too far, personally. I mean, I do share some people's concerns about cameras in use, but if public bodies and authorities are properly held to account, and that's the key to this. It's not so that we can control people and do all those things. It's protect and keep them safe. But there is a fine balance. We don't want to feel as if we're in this huge surveillance society, but at the same time, we want to be able to make sure that justice prevails. And some nervousness and some debate around this is absolutely essential, so that those public authorities, the police, local authorities, the Home Office and everyone else, are properly held to account over it. So I don't have any difficulty over that. It's just that, we have to let some common sense prevail too.
Silkie, your thoughts on cameras everywhere?
Well, unfortunately, that is now a reality, and the UK is one of the most surveilled nations on earth.
What are the statistics, actually? I read that there's a camera for every 32 people. Is that right?
Yes, at least. And London in particular is one of the most surveilled cities in the world. But yes, as a nation, there are more CCTV cameras than almost anywhere else in the world. Our state surveillance regime is the most authoritarian of any democracy actually in history. So we have set the bar extremely high for levels of surveillance in this country. Suspicionless surveillance on innocent people. Now, I think body-worn video is a bit different to that, but clearly, given the potential for mission creep, we do worry that they could become an intelligence gathering tool, and that's something that would be really simple to solve just with some guidelines. But certainly in the UK, we do have a much bigger problem with living in a surveillance society.
Thank you very much, Silkie. Great to have you on this morning. Silkie Carlo, Director of Big Brother Watch.